Hello, everybody, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Therapist Confidential podcast. I'm Travis Heath. I'm the dude that they've entrusted to captain this ship, this Therapist Confidential ship. We'll see how it goes. I've never hosted a podcast before. I've listened to many. I've been on a few, but I've never hosted one before. So I'm actually really excited to do this. I want to cover in this first episode the hopes and intentions that I have for this podcast. And next time, I'll introduce myself a bit because I'm imagining some folks listening probably don't know me. And since I'm the one who is going to facilitate this whole thing, I feel like I owe it to all of you to tell you a little bit about my story and how I got here. So the first part, talking about, hopes and intentions for the podcast. I mean, there's like many podcasts, right? And to be real honest with you, I don't listen to a ton of therapy podcasts or mental health podcasts. I really don't. And I don't know, maybe that's because I get enough of that with the job that I do and all that fun stuff. But I think also some of the mental health therapy sort of podcasts I've listened to, they're they're too well groomed for my taste, if that makes sense. It's like a news broadcast or something, and it just doesn't quite land. And one way I'm hoping to show up, and I'm sure y'all will let me know if I have even a reasonable degree of success in doing this or not, but I'd like to try to show up like it with all my complexity as a human being, you know? I'd like to show up imperfectly. I'd like to show up messy. I'd like to show up honest. Like anyone, I mean, I'm sure there'll be times more of that shows up than other times, but that's what I'm aiming for. I'm aiming for less news anchory and more just sort of messy, complex me. So what does that mean in terms of like what this podcast will look like? I mean, one is I'd like to have some guests. Psychotherapy.net is, y'all know psychotherapy.net, all the cool videos, right? I mean, that's who's driving this podcast. And, one thing about psychotherapy.net, if you go on to the site, is that pretty much anyone who's anyone has a video there, right? Like there's some really cool old school legends of the field. And then, some of the more new school folks that are coming up, there's some videos there too. And it's just a really cool site with all kinds of folks. And I would like to have guests like that on the show. I'd also like to have other kinds of guests. I'd like to have the kinds of guests that maybe aren't as well known to the public quite yet. And I say quite yet because I think look, some of the best therapists I know, maybe most of the world doesn't know about them, but that doesn't mean that they're not masters of their crafts. I also want some folks that aren't therapists at all, to be honest with you, who might critique therapy, might help us look at it from another angle. I mean, what I don't want is a bunch of groupthink where we get therapists together and we all agree about how great therapy is, and how it's saving the world. I think therapy does have something to offer, no doubt. I think, first of all, I don't even know if I know what therapy is. So at some point, we're going to have to define that on this particular show because I don't know if I know what therapy is, okay? When we have guests on, I'd really like to ask, I'm hopeful that some of my questions will be weird questions. Because I think weird questions take us to interesting places. And I think when we go to interesting places, sometimes we see what's behind the curtain. And for as much as we as therapists talk about things like genuineness and authenticity, I don't know that we always practice that stuff. I feel like most of the time as therapists, we have some kind of like little veil up. And I don't know if it's as obvious to the general public as it is to other therapists, but man, I feel like most of us can see when that thing's up. And, there's a place for that. There's a place for this kind of professionalized way of being. I'm less interested in that on this particular show. I'd like to talk some about when we failed spectacularly, right? wondering like, am I even cut out to do this? Because I think a lot of us have those feelings. And yet most of what we see is, especially from quote unquote master therapists, is just how great we are, right? And I think even those quote unquote master therapists, if we could have a real conversation, I think they'll also admit that like, no, there's a lot of times we don't know where we're going. We're trying to find our way as we go. We're having doubt, we're having insecurity, we're wondering, am I even doing anything for this person? And then you mix capitalism in with all of this, and it's like, oh my gosh, people are paying me money. Am I like even doing anything worth getting paid for? Right? But no matter what it is we're practicing, I think it's often messier than we let on. And so I'm hopeful that I can ask some weird questions. I don't know what those will always be, but I hope they're weird enough that we can pull the curtain back a little and we can get into some of the mess and some of the ambiguity. I think along with that, I'm always interested in what's happening that's different in the field, or if we want to use that word again, weird, in the field. I think that there are always people who are doing things that are pushing the limits. They're at the margins. Now, often we don't hear about this work, of course, until it makes its way more into the mainstream. But like, I'm really interested in people that are doing things differently. And usually we know that people are doing things sufficiently differently when the therapeutic establishment is angry or the therapeutic establishment is saying, this isn't real therapy. Usually when I hear those kind of comments, I lean in because I'm like, ooh, something interesting is probably happening here. So I'd love to talk about what's different in the field. What are people trying? I mean, one of my mentors, David Epstein, who co-founded Narrative Therapy, he and Michael White talked about a spirit of adventure in therapy. And I'll tell you more about this in my story at the end of this episode, but I feel like I didn't know if I could continue doing therapy before I met David Epstein. And this idea of having a spirit of adventure in therapy really appealed to me. It was freeing in a lot of ways, right? It was opening us up to trying new things, taking risks, and of course, failing in all of that, which I've done plenty of. So I'm really interested in trying to tap into what are people doing that's different. Now, having said that, I'm also interested in the history of the field. I mean, as an undergraduate professor for over a decade, I taught the history and systems of psychology course. So I'm also very interested in historical aspects of therapy. And I'm interested in how what we started with has been redesigned, refashioned, recreated, reimagined, right? So I am interested in what's being done that's different, and I have a historical interest as well. I don't think we have to limit ourselves in what we might look at. Another topic I'd like to open ourselves up to is current controversies. Listen, I just did air quotes. Air quotes are not great for a podcast, so I'm going to have to figure this stuff out. So current controversies in air quotes, because like everything feels like a controversy these days. You know what I mean? Like in its heyday, therapy Twitter or Twitter therapy, or I don't know what the hashtag was. Let's just say therapy Twitter. I mean, lots of interesting conversation. Everything was a controversy, right? And it seems like in the world we live in these days, everything's a controversy. So that's why I put it in air quotes. But some of those, and by the way, I will never call it X or whatever it is. I'll still call it Twitter. But I remember one controversy in particular. Here's what it was. It was, should therapists eat during session? And I remember seeing the question. I was like, oh, that's an interesting question. But I didn't have any real strong feelings about it. I just thought about it relative to my experience. I'm like, I don't think I've really done that. And boy, over the next like 24 hours, that became 48 hours, it became a week. I mean, this thing blew up and people were getting militant about, one side saying, absolutely, it's self-care, you can eat, and the other side going, you should never eat a crumb of food or you're unprofessional. Wow. So Yes, I'd like to have guests on here. And sometimes when there's like a controversy, quote unquote, I just like to talk about that. I may just come on here and talk a little bit about it. And of course, when we do that, and I'm like right now, I'm the only one talking. So of course my opinion is here. Like, I'm not going to say I'm neutral in what I'm presenting. My opinions are here. They're a part of this, right? Also, I'm not interested in just giving my opinion in this sort of format. What I'm more interested in is like exploring all the different aspects, or maybe not all, that would be hard, but exploring multiple different aspects of a particular topic. And my hope is that this feels like a conversation. Like my favorite podcast, I notice myself, I don't know if y'all do this, I'll listen to podcasts and I'll actually talk back to the host. Sometimes I'll laugh at sometimes I'll laugh at the host because they're funny, but sometimes I'm like, that's a ludicrous point. And then I'm speaking back to the host. And if that could happen here, that would be amazing. Like I'd consider that a win because I hope that this feels like a conversation where I raise some questions, even when I'm just on here, just talking, that you feel like I'm not talking at you or through you, but I'm talking with you. I hope in the spirit, just building off of kind of what I just said, I hope this can build a spirit of community. Now, communities aren't built in one episode. You don't, like right now, you don't have any reason to feel connected quite yet to me or to the show. But my hope is that y'all will stick with us and that over time we will build a community. And my hope is it'll be a diverse community with people that practice therapy in different ways and who have different ideas. I'd even like to have community members on as guests. I'd like to have multiple guests where we could have panels where we're talking about particular topics and people that might have relative expertise in those topics. But out of all of that, I hope emerges a sense of community. Because I think when we have that sense that even if we're not doing therapy the exact same way, even if we have different perspectives, even if we come from different quote unquote therapeutic generations, that in a very general sense, we're all trying to move the boat to the same shore. We're all rowing in the same direction here. Now, we might disagree about how we're going to get there, but I do think that the vast majority of people that I've encountered in this field, they really want to do well by the people we're serving. Whether you think therapy is about processing or whether you think it's about healing, whether you think it's about learning how to think differently, like whatever it is that we think therapy is about, I see people that are all trying to move towards the same shore. And so I hope there can be definitely a spirit of disagreement and different perspectives with an understanding that at least the folks I've run into over 20 years of doing this, we're all trying to get to the same place, even if we have disagreements about how to get there. So those are some of my hopes and intentions for the podcast. I don't know, those can evolve, those can change. This is episode 1. I'm just kind of stepping in front of this microphone and just telling you what I'm thinking about today. And I fully acknowledge these hopes and intentions can change, and I bet they will, and I hope they do, but hopefully this at least gives you some idea of what I'm hoping for out of this Therapist Confidential podcast.